I planned to survive Thanksgiving by smiling on cue and swallowing insults like cold mashed potatoes. But then my grandfather, a billionaire famous for never missing a digit, slammed his hand on the table and read my full name like a verdict. I froze and whispered that I had no idea about it before the family could laugh, but the air in the room didn't just chill, it turned to ice. Imagine sitting across from the man who holds the keys to your entire future, watching him look at you with pure, unadulterated fury while your own parents look away, and realizing that your life, you know it is over. Was I wrong for standing my ground when the world's most powerful man called me a thief? Or would you have done exactly the same thing to save your soul? Tell me if you would have stayed quiet, or if you would have let the truth burn the whole house down. Because that is exactly what happened next. My name is Ivy Parker, and at 33 years old, I've mastered the art of being invisible. I work as a senior contract analyst at Verus Solutions, a mid-sized firm where my entire existence revolves around the microscopic details that everyone else ignores. I am the person who finds the missing comma in a 50-page merger that could cost a CEO his third vacation home. I am the person who notices when a sub-clause in an insurance policy contradicts the main preamble. My life is lived in the margins, in the fine print, and in the quiet spaces between loud conversations. This skill, this obsessive, compulsive need to see things for what they actually are, is exactly why I've always been the black sheep of the Blackwood family. You see, the Blackwoods don't like the fine print. They like grand gestures, sweeping narratives, and the kind of power that doesn't need to explain itself. Growing up in the shadow of my grandfather, Ronan Blackwood, meant living in a world where truth was whatever he decided it was at that particular moment. Ronan is a legend in the industrial world. He built Blackwood Global from a single struggling shipyard in the post-war era into a multi-billion-dollar logistics and steel empire. He's the kind of man who shakes hands with prime ministers and then complains that their grip was too weak. To the world, he is a titan. To me, he was always a distant, terrifying mountain. The estate in Hawthorne Hills, Connecticut, is a physical manifestation of that power. It's not a house, it's a fortress built of cold stone, dark mahogany, and memories of every family member who failed to meet his standards. As I drove up the winding driveway that Thanksgiving morning, the gravel crunching under my modest sedan, a car Aunt Mara once called a charming relic of the working class, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. The air in Hawthorne Hills is different. It's thinner, colder, and smells faintly of expensive floor wax and old, bitter secrets. My mother, Tessa, met me in the foyer. She looked immaculate, her face pulled tight by years of surgical interventions and the constant stress of trying to remain Ronan's favorite child. She didn't hug me. Instead, she adjusted the collar of my coat and sighed. "Ivy, you look tired. Did you have to work late again? You know, if you just asked your grandfather for a position in the firm, you wouldn't have to scramble for crumbs at that little place of yours." This was her opening gambit, the same one she's used for a decade. In her mind, my independence was a personal insult to her lifestyle. She didn't understand that I didn't want the Blackwood name. I just wanted my own. We moved into the great hall where the rest of the family was gathering. The sheer scale of the room always made me feel like an ant under a magnifying glass. The ceilings are 30 feet high, adorned with frescoes that Ronan probably commissioned just to prove he could. Aunt Mara was there, holding a crystal glass of sherry like it was a weapon. Mara is the kind of woman who uses compliments as a way to point out your flaws. "Ivy, darling, I love that you're still wearing that dress from 3 years ago. It's so brave of you to reject fast fashion." Behind her stood my cousin Dylan, a man who had spent 30 years failing upward. He was currently on his 4th startup, which was really just a way for him to burn through his trust fund while claiming he was an entrepreneur. He barely looked up from his phone, a bored smirk permanently etched onto his face. My father, Graham, stood by the fireplace, looking like he wanted to disappear into the stones. He had married into the Blackwood money and had spent every day since then apologizing for it. The dinner itself was an exercise in psychological warfare. We were seated at the mahogany table, a piece of furniture so long that you practically needed a telegram to talk to the person at the other end. The lighting was provided by antique candelabras that cast long, flickering shadows against the walls, making everyone look slightly more villainous than they already were. The meal was a 7-course affair served by staff who moved with the silent efficiency of ghosts. We were eating organic turkey raised on a specific farm in Vermont, accompanied by side dishes that cost more than my monthly rent. But nobody was enjoying the food. In the Blackwood house you don't eat, you wait for the next move. Ronan sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the candlelight. He hadn't said a word since the soup course. He just watched us. He watched the way Mara tried to dominate the conversation. He watched the way Dylan checked his watch every 5 minutes. And he watched me. The tension started to boil over during the main course. Mara was mid-sentence, describing a gala she had organized for disadvantaged youths, which mostly involved rich people eating caviar while talking about poverty, when Ronan suddenly dropped his fork. The sound of silver hitting the china was like a crack of thunder in the silent room. Mara stopped talking instantly. Her mouth stayed open for a second before she slowly closed it and took a frantic sip of wine. Ronan didn't look at her. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on me. "Ivy," he said, and the way he spoke my name made my blood turn to lead. "I've spent 60 years building an empire on the foundation of loyalty and precision. I have never missed a decimal point. I have never miscalculated a risk. So you can imagine my surprise when I found a $7 million hole in the Heritage Trust. I felt the air leave the room." The Heritage Trust was the bedrock of the family's private wealth, a fund meant to ensure the Blackwood name lasted for centuries. "Grandfather, I don't understand," I stammered. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Dylan could hear it across the table. Ronan reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of papers. He didn't slide them, he threw them. They fanned out across the table, some sliding into the gravy, others landing near my plate. "I have the audit, Ivy. I have the transfer logs. $7 million moved over 3 years from the Heritage account into a private shell company called Ivy Leaf Holdings. The digital signature belongs to your private encrypted key. The transfers happened on the 1st of every month, usually late at night." I stared at the papers. My name was everywhere. My social security number, my old address, my signature. It was a perfect digital trail. I have no idea about this," I whispered. It was the only thing I could say. My mind was racing, trying to process the sheer scale of the accusation. $7 million. I didn't even have 7,000 in my savings account. I looked at my mother, expecting her to scream, to defend me, to say it was impossible. But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at her wine glass, her face a mask of practiced grief. My father was looking at the ceiling, his hands shaking. Mara, on the other hand, let out a sharp, theatrical gasp. "Ivy, how could you? After everything this family has given you, the opportunities, the name. You've been playing the martyr in your little apartment while you were bleeding us dry." "I didn't do this," I shouted, standing up so quickly my chair nearly tipped over. "I don't even know what Ivy Leaf Holdings is. I struggle to pay my car insurance every month. Why would I be living like that if I had $7 million? Ronan's face didn't change. It stayed that cold, judgmental mask. "Because you're smart, Ivy. You're a contract analyst. You know how to hide things. You thought you could play the long game, living modestly until I passed away, and then you'd have your little nest egg ready. But you forgot one thing. I am not dead yet." The cruelty in his voice was staggering. He wasn't just accusing me of theft. He was accusing me of being a parasite waiting for him to rot. I looked around the table, and for the first time the fine print of the room started to become clear to me. I saw the way Dylan's smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of intense focus. I saw the way Mara was glancing at my mother, a look of shared understanding passing between them. And then I saw the briefcase. A man had entered the room, Callum, the Blackwood family's lead counsel for 30 years. He wasn't wearing a coat, despite the cold. He looked like he had been waiting in the hallway for his cue. He placed a heavy, black leather briefcase on the table next to Ronan. "The documentation is complete, Mr. Blackwood," Callum said, his voice as dry as parchment. So that is the situation I was in. My billionaire grandfather was accusing me of stealing a fortune. My parents were silent, and a lawyer had just crashed our Thanksgiving dinner with a briefcase full of evidence. I had to make a choice. Do I let them steamroll me? Do I accept the role of the villain they've written for me? Or do I fight back against the most powerful man I've ever known? Before I tell you what was actually inside that briefcase and how I realized my own parents had been setting me up for years, I want you to pause right now. Go down to the comments and tell me what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have broken down and cried, or would you have started looking for the loopholes? I'm reading every single one of your responses, so let me know. The silence that followed Callum's entrance was suffocating. Ronan looked at me, then at the briefcase. "In here," Ronan said, tapping the leather, "is the final proof. Not just the transfers, but the letters." I blinked. "What letters?" Ronan's eyes narrowed. "Don't play the innocent, Ivy. For 3 years I've been sending you letters. Every month, on the 1st, I sent a certified letter to the address your mother provided. I offered you seats on board. I offered you the chance to explain the discrepancies I was starting to see. I even offered to forgive the first million if you just came to me and admitted you were in over your head. You never replied, not once. You just kept taking. I felt the world tilt. Grandfather, I never received any letters. I haven't heard from you in 3 years, other than the annual Thanksgiving summons. I live on West 4th Street. My mail comes every day. I've never seen a Blackwood seal in my life." I turned to my mother. "Mom, you gave him my address, right? You know where I live." My mother finally looked up, her eyes red. "Ivy, please, don't drag me into your lies. I gave him the address you gave me. If you were moving around, hiding from the consequences of your actions, that's not on me." She was lying. I could see the tiny pulse in her neck, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. A classic tell she's had since I was a child. She was lying through her teeth. I realized then that this wasn't just about a hole in a trust. This was a choreographed execution. Someone had been intercepting my mail. Someone had been siphoning money using my identity. And they had been doing it right under Ronan's nose, using my reputation as the fragile, distant granddaughter as the perfect cover. I reached out and grabbed the audit papers from the table. My hands were shaking, but my brain was starting to click into gear. I am a contract analyst. This is what I do. I looked at the signatures. They were good, excellent even. But as I flipped through the pages of Ivy Leaf Holdings, I noticed a pattern. The shell company wasn't just a bank account. It was a series of real estate holdings. Small properties mostly. Condos in Florida, a small shopping plaza in Arizona. I looked at Aunt Mara. She was suddenly very interested in her fingernails. I looked at the dates of the transfers. They coincided exactly with the dates Dylan had launched his new startups. I looked at Callum, the lawyer. He was standing perfectly still, but his eyes were darting between Ronan and my mother. "Grandfather," I said, my voice gaining a clarity that surprised even me, "may I see the letters, the ones you sent me?" Ronan nodded to Callum, who opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of envelopes. They were all there. The Blackwood seal, my name in Ronan's sharp, aggressive handwriting. I picked one up. It was unopened. I looked at the postmark. It was sent to a P.O. box in Hawthorne Hills. I don't have a P.O. box in Hawthorne Hills, I said, holding the envelope up. I've never had one. Why would I? I live 2 hours away. My mother jumped in, her voice shrill. "You said you wanted your mail kept safe, Ivy. You said you didn't trust your neighbors in the city. I set it up for you as a favor." I looked her dead in the eye. "And did you also sign for the certified mail as me, Mom? Because these were certified. Someone had to show an ID. Someone had to be Ivy Parker at the Hawthorne Hills post office." The room went dead silent. My mother's face went from pale to a sickly, mottled red. I turned back to the audit. "Now let's look at these transfers," I said, my voice getting louder. "Ivy Leaf Holdings, registered in Delaware. The registered agent is a company called T&G Management. T&G, Tessa and Graham." I looked at my father. He looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He reached for his water, but his hand was shaking so badly he knocked the glass over. The water spilled across the mahogany table, soaking into the white linen. It was a rainy day fund, Ivy, he whispered, his voice cracking. "The estate, Ronan is so strict. We just wanted to make sure we had something for our retirement." The truth finally crashed down on the table. My parents hadn't just been stealing. They had been using me as a human shield. They knew Ronan would eventually find the missing money. He's Ronan Blackwood, after all. So they built a trail that led straight to me. They intercepted his letters, so I would never know he was looking for me. They forged my signature on documents they managed for me. They calculated that Ronan would be so disgusted with my betrayal that he would never look closer at them. They were willing to let their only daughter go to prison to protect their country club memberships and Florida condos. I looked at Ronan. For the first time, the mountain looked human. He looked old. He looked at the wet tablecloth, then at my father, then at the daughter who had been intercepting his attempts to connect with his granddaughter. The fury in his eyes was no longer directed at me. It was a cold, quiet fire directed at the people sitting right next to him. "Tessa," he said, and the name sounded like a curse. "You stole from your own blood. You used your child as a decoy. You took the one thing I valued this family's integrity, and you traded it for a shopping plaza in Arizona. Dad, listen." My mother started, her voice desperate. "We were going to tell you. We were just holding it for her." Silence. Ronan roared, and the candles flickered. He turned to Callum, the briefcase now. Callum, who I realized now must have been in on the audit, but perhaps not the full extent of the deception, handed him a final document. It was a power of attorney form. It had my signature on it, giving my parents full control over my financial identity. I looked at it. It was dated 5 years ago, right after I had a major surgery and was under heavy medication. They had made me sign it while I was barely conscious. The climax wasn't a shouting match. It was a legal execution. Ronan didn't call the police. That wouldn't be the Blackwood way. He called for his private security. Within 10 minutes, my parents were being escorted out of the house. They weren't allowed to take their cars. Those were leased through the firm. They weren't allowed to take their jewelry. Those were family heirlooms. Ronan told them they had 48 hours to vacate their home before the locks were changed. He turned to Aunt Mara and Dylan. "As for you two, I'll be looking into your charities and startups very, very closely. If I find a single cent of Blackwood money out of place, you'll be joining them on the sidewalk." The aftermath was a whirlwind of lawyers and balance sheets. I stayed at Hawthorne Hills for a week, helping Callum untangle the mess my parents had made. We found more than just the $7 million. We found a decade of small thefts, forged documents, and lies. My parents tried to call me, tried to tell me they did it for my future, but I blocked their numbers. I realized that the fragile girl they had tried to keep in a cage was gone. The fine print had set me free. Ronan offered me the vice presidency of the Heritage Trust. I declined. I didn't want his money, and I didn't want his power. I took a small settlement, exactly the amount I would have earned if I had been working at Blackwood Global for the last 10 years, and I used it to start my own firm. 1 year later, I am the CEO of Parker Audit and Compliance. I don't work for billionaires. I work for people like me, people who are being squeezed by powerful families or corrupt corporations. I spend my days looking for the missing commas and the forged signatures, ensuring that the quiet ones are never used as shields again. Ronan and I have a professional relationship now. We have lunch once a month. We don't talk about my parents. We talk about the markets, the law, and the fine print. He's still a shark, but now he knows I'm one too. I learned that Thanksgiving that blood isn't always thicker than water. Sometimes it's just more expensive. I lost the parents I thought I had, but I gained a life that belongs entirely to me. I am no longer invisible. I am the one who sees everything. If you were on my side during this whole ordeal, like this video right now, it means the world to know that people see the truth. Subscribe for more stories like this where the underdog finally gets their day, and please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did my parents get what they deserved, or should I have forgiven them? I want to know what you think. I'll see you all in the next story.